This was a day for boats that sail before the wind. It was a celebration of a time beyond our own, the Age of Discovery, a commemoration of the voyage of Christopher Columbus 500 years ago, a welcome for the return of the tall ships to Boston Harbor.
Return of the Tall Ships, a spread of canvas in salute to Christopher Columbus and the Age of Discovery. From the Boston waterfront with the highlights of this grand regatta, here is Ted Reinstein.
Good evening, I'm Ted Reinstein, and welcome to a review of what has been, without question, one of the most exciting and dramatic days in the history of Boston Harbor. A gathering of nearly 250 ships from 30 different countries and a parade of sail that was as beautiful as it was historic. Even now, hours after the parade has passed, people here along the waterfront just don't seem to want to go home. But for us, the great event began officially at 9 this morning.
Good morning, Natalie Jacobson and Chet Curtis reporting to you. You are looking at a picture of Boston Harbor from a camera atop International Place. The pleasure boats in the foreground that you can see are waiting to catch a first-hand glimpse of the tall ships as they come by.
And beyond, you're looking at Broad Sound, just at the mouth of historic Boston Harbor, where the most extraordinary fleet of tall ships ever assembled is waiting to begin the parade of sail. In all, nearly 250 sailing vessels from around the world are here, flying the brilliant colors of their country.
Let me say hello to Red Shannon at this point, Captain Red Shannon, who is the captain of the Sea Cloud square-rigged ship, who's going to be with us throughout the day. And also
Dennis Conner, America's Cup skipper, will be talking with Dennis Conner and with Red Shannon throughout the morning and throughout the afternoon. Dennis Conner, what do pageants like this parade of sail do for the image of sailing? We were talking a few minutes before we went on the air that you know, the television has really made sailing certainly a more popular sport than it's been for some time.
Well, certainly the medium which we live with, and the opportunity for sailing to be highlighted is a very important one. These boats are magnificent. Their presence is, I think, in awe for everyone. And just seeing these people here and bringing the public awareness of yachting and sailing, it's great for everybody. It has a synergistic effect on all of sailing. Not only do the competitors come, but the spectators come, and they're bringing fresh dollars to the area. It has a turnover, and everybody benefits in the form of jobs, tax revenues, and so on. So this event here in Boston is important not only for the sailors and the yachtsmen and the people on the ships themselves, the spectators, but all of the community here will benefit from having the boats come.
Chet Curtis and Natalie Jacobson from atop Anthony's Pier 4 in Boston Harbor.
And we have cameras and crews all around this harbor, so let's whip around and show you what they can see at this point. The first camera will be able to pick up the tall ships is at Long Island. That's at the lighthouse out there. You get your first look of the ships as they come in from Broad Sound. Long Island, you know, has been subject of some controversy, but just yesterday, Mayor of Quincy and the Mayor of Boston agreed that indeed this was not a safe place for people to go out and view the ships because of all the damage that was done in the last storm, which was really too bad because so many folks in Quincy were counting on being able to sit out there and get a good view. The next vantage point for our cameras that you'll be able to catch the ships is from Castle Island. That's a big public viewing area there, and Dick Albert and Susan Warnick are out there, and we'll be able to talk with some of the folks. Just let this plane go by. And then following Castle Island, we've got another camera at the Fish Pier, which today is the official reviewing stand. You may be able to pick up some music that's coming from there. The official ceremonies, various officials from different countries and so forth will be stopping there, and our cameras are there, and we'll get you whatever happens there too. And then we move on to our camera location here at Pier 4. We have a number of cameras. The ships will pass right by here. You'll be able to see that. From there, Bay State Lobster. And Pam Cross is up at Bay State Lobster. And that's where you'll see the turnaround, which I guess, I don't know, it seems like no small feat to me, but Captain Red Shannon says, don't worry about it, they'll handle it. And then at International, as mentioned, International Place, then they come back around, or I should say International Place is this long shot that you see here where you can see the whole panoramic view of the Boston Harbor.
Good morning and welcome aboard the U.S. Coast Guard Bark Eagle. It is the largest active tall ship, the only active tall ship in the U.S. military. It is a 295-foot floating classroom. It is here that cadets from the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut get their first taste of salt air and sea life. Now, to the uninitiated, it's a very impressive sight. It's about the length of one football field, 22,000 square feet of sail, 5 miles of rigging. And trust me, these young men and women work awfully hard. Now, right now, we're moving by motor because the westerly wind is in our face. Hopefully, at about 10:30 at the turnaround, they will pull the sails up and we'll sail on in the rest of the way. Now, so right now, there isn't much activity on the ship except here at the helm. And this young man here, George Borlis from Fairfax, Virginia, is going to explain to us what you guys are doing over here. Good morning, George.
Good morning. What happens is the captain is up there standing on top of the bridge, and he sees which course the boat is steering. And what he'll do is he'll yell down to the main helmsman here what course to go to steer by or how much to shift the rudder. And then he'll yell back to make sure that he heard correctly.
Right, but you guys don't yell as loud as he yelled, right?
Oh, no, we don't yell as loud as he knows. He's God of the ship. The captain's pretty much God, so he yells out, and then we yell back, and then we steer by that.
Will you tell us what's going out aboard the cruise and stern and what you see around you?
Actually, we've got all the young, and they're very young, midshipmen on board the ship here. It's a training vessel for the Russians. It's one of the largest ships in the fleet out here today, 376 feet in length. It's a typical four-masted square rigger bark, and it is really something to behold. If you've never had an experience like this, it is truly amazing.
You know, let me ask you, Dennis, and maybe Captain Shannon, jump in on this. What makes a sailing ship so beautiful? You know, it's only masts and yards and canvas and wood and steel, and yet you can't help but, you know, it takes your breath away a little bit when you see one of these things in full sail.
Well, it's a little bit of the romance of the sea and harnessing the nature here to get out there and enjoy the water. And to me, it's a chance of freedom, and it's just fun, whatever boat you're on, from a windsurfer or a big ship.
Yes, I'd like to add a little bit. There are many, many ships here, but even though they're out of steel or wood or iron, some of them, they still have to have a crew. And the crew really is what makes the ship. They're give the intestinal fortitude to the vessel. Without a good crew and a good master, the ship is really lost. So with those things, it becomes a mark of beauty.
We should tell you, there's another shot from the Russian vessel, the Krusenstern. The parade of sail will be broken down into 19 flotillas, each flotilla led by a flagship and joined by several smaller vessels. The first flotilla will be led by Old Ironsides, the USS Constitution, the oldest active warship in the United States Navy, and by the Coast Guard bark, the Eagle. In case you're wondering about that space-age sound, those are jet airplanes taking off from Logan Airport. The winds are such that the takeoff path is taking these jets almost directly over our anchor booth, the top Anthony's Pier 4 here in Boston Harbor. So that may be a problem from time to time, but that's the way it goes. There's the Eagle's got quite a few of her sails.
Right, the Eagle is doing well there. She has her all her squaresails up except for her foresail and mainsail. Those are the two lower squares on the foremast and mainmast, and she's under full sail. She looks real handsome out there.
He said with great pride on his face and in his voice.
Would they be at this point also motoring or using the auxiliary engines for any kind of stability or to control speed a little better?
Yes, most of the square riggers have internal combustion engines there, and they're going to control their speed of advance with their engines.
As you sit here, Red, you wish you were on board? You still?
No, I had
No?
12 fine years with the ship, and now I've been 5 years with a German four-masted bark, and I'm on vacation now, so I enjoyed it.
All right, Jim Boyd and Susan Burke are at the Fish Pier, which is the official reviewing stand. Let's check in with them now.
Hi, Chet. What's happening right now is we have a couple of sort of competing bands with us now. The fife and drum that you just heard a second ago here at the official reviewing stand down on the other end, we should be able to see in a couple of moments or so, is a group from the Lexington Minutemen.
That's right.
And they are now presenting their colors. It's going to be quite a ceremony out here over the next couple of hours. There's going to be a 21-gun salute. I'm sorry, a 19-gun salute that will be presented as the ships pass by. Oh, that should be coming up in about another 40 minutes or so.
That's right. You know, we've got a lot of the dignitaries, a lot of the VIPs have begun to arrive. It's not quite full yet. They've been taking their time. I'm sure most of them had parking passes, so it wasn't a big problem. We have been seeing a lot of people down here walking down to the Fish Pier area and even past that area.
And Chet and Natalie, I think that you may be able to see in the shot that we're providing you now some of the colors representing the flags of the 34 different nations that are involved in today's parade of sail. As Susan mentioned, you know, the stands are starting now to fill up for the big spectacle as the parade of ships gets underway in a very short while.
They've certainly done a good job. Everybody has been saying how well organized this Sail Boston is, and it's been a lot of effort. That's the beginning of the salute here.
That's the Minutemen firing off their salute. And I think right in your view now, you're getting, you know, the actual picture of the Minutemen as they are standing in their formation. I can't quite see what the instruments are that they're playing, but all part of the spectacle that makes this just one absolutely outstanding event.
You know, one of the interesting things, I was talking to the Boston Historical Society a couple of days ago, and this is, of course, the biggest collection of ships to ever come in Boston Harbor. But they were saying that back in the 1800s, when the tall ships were, of course, the way that commerce was moved around the world, that on any given day you would have at least a dozen big flagships coming into Boston Harbor, as well as a dozen dozens and dozens of smaller ships. So it's a very authentic look at how Boston Harbor used to look in many of the ways that you see the paintings filled with ships from the 1800s.
And I must say that we are among the fortunate. I think this is one of the great spectating points along the harbor. And we'll be watching, as you will be watching.
That's right.
I'm going to toss it back to you now, Chet and Natalie.
All right, Jim and Susan, thank you very much. Great shot of the fireboat and Old Ironsides, the USS Constitution, who after her participation in the Parade of Sail will be going into dry dock for some serious restoration work right now.
Oh, yeah.
And for the first, that'll be the first time she's going to be in dry dock in some time.
And we'll be firing a 19-gun salute, or one gun will fire 19 times. I'm not sure which way they go. Why 19 and not 21, Red?
Well, the 19 is for the state of Massachusetts and the governor. If the president was here, it would be a 21-gun salute. But 19 is for the state of Massachusetts and the governor.
What a history that ship has had.
You know, we
Old
mentioned Red and Dennis earlier that in the 60s, as we sat here, we were talking about the tall ships being a dying breed. Only a handful of them remained in the world. And now there are nearly 3 times as many of the Class A ships afloat. 16 tall ships at the 76th bicentennial, 20 at the Statue of Liberty celebration in 1986, and almost 30 of the big square riggers will be here, along with some 200 smaller vessels, making this by far the largest such gathering of vessels in modern history.
If you've never been on a boat in your life, you can't help but be moved as you stand here and anticipate the ships, watch them as they come into the harbor, and watch that sunrise over the water.
The actual parade is underway. It'll be a while before the first flotilla comes by the reviewing stand at the Fish Pier, but there's kind of a good overall shot of several of the sailing vessels together with just dozens and dozens of private pleasure boats that have been in the harbor, many of them anchored there overnight, just waiting for this parade of sail.
Again, you're looking at the Krusenstern, the Russian ship, and Dennis is going to leave us in a few minutes because he's headed back down to Newport, where he's involved in another race. Tell us about the Etchels.
Yeah, for the landlubbers, just what is an Etchel?
Well, it's a one-design boat that is about 32 feet long, and it's not really particularly high-tech. It's just a boat you can go out and race with your friends, and there's a number of local fleets. We have one of the best fleets in the world right up here in Marblehead, where Dave Curtis is a perennial world champion. So it's just a chance to get out there and enjoy the water in a competitive spirit with your friends. It's not like the America's Cup, but so that's one of the great things about sailing is that you don't have to be sailing in the America's Cup to enjoy it. You can enjoy it in a tall ship. You can enjoy it in a windsurfer. You can just get out there and use the wind and the weather and have a great time.
What's your favorite? It's got to be the America's Cup, huh?
I actually like the one design racing in small boats the best, where the boats are all pretty much the same, and it's just a matter of your sailing skill that prevails on the results. But America's Cup is special because it's really a game of life. You have to raise the money, you have to get out there and get your sponsors, and then you got the technology involved in building a boat and getting it out there in the water. Then you of course have the training of the crew and the design of the sails. It's a whole it's just like running a big business, and the bottom line instead of profit is who wins the event.
Well, before we move on to some of our other locations here, I know Dennis is anxious to get down and make the start of that race, which is at 11. So we're going to helicopter him down back to Newport.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. I know you're going to have a great day here, and it's great to have Captain Shannon here as an expert to identify all the boats and give you a real feeling of what's going on aboard the ship. So I'm sorry I'm going to miss it, but I know you're going to have a great day.
Well, we are. We appreciate your sharing your sense of sailing and competition and racing in some of the boats that we're not going to see here today.
Well, who knows? Maybe we'll have the America's Cup right here in Boston.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Whoa, see if you can arrange that.
Live and on board.
Good
Thanks
to see
for having
you.
me.
Good luck this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Wouldn't that be nice indeed? Well, that was earlier this morning. Now it is after 6:30 p.m. All of the tall ships are now docked and riding at their berths at several locations in and around Boston Harbor. And I'll tell you, this evening, to look around the harbor and the waterfront and see so many wooden masts towering over some of the waterfront buildings is really to get a glimpse of a much earlier era in Boston's waterfront history. I think a lot of people had that feeling today, and perhaps the tall ships satisfy an illusion of the past for a lot of us. After all, they are graceful survivors of sun and tides, wind and rain, just like we are. We'll be back. At times today it was possible to see modern naval vessels all gleaming steel alongside some of the old tall ships, all wood and sail and ropes. And I think it was hard for a lot of people to imagine which might be tougher or more impressive to build. I mean, if nothing else, the tall ships are marvels of construction. And even if you can't tell the difference between a brigantine from a saltine, you have to be impressed by the way these ships are put together.
Tim, Colonel John DeVoe, a retired Air Force colonel, sent me a quote the other day, which I thought was kind of pretty. And as beautiful as anything that man has made, built for strength and speed, and yet strangely tender for ships of sail. And that kind of says it.
Well, I think that square riggers were certainly the pinnacle of man's ability to harness nature's energy and utilize it for his benefit. And these ships today are some of them are almost 100 years old, and I think it's wonderful that there's been an increase in interest in them in the last 10 years.
You're listening to the 19-gun salute now from Old Ironsides USS Constitution as she passes the reviewing stand at the Fish Pier. Old Ironsides will be tugged back to her berth at the Charlestown Navy Yard, and then she'll go into dry dock for a period of perhaps 18 months while she undergoes hull inspection and undergoes whatever repairs.
She'll still be playing a part in these festivities this day, though. As you know, Prince Philip will be touring the Constitution on Monday along with Governor Weld. You're looking at the Danmark from the vantage point of the camera on Long Island.
Yes, the Danmark is a real fine vessel. She's a full-rigged ship and has been around for many years, built in 1933. She trains cadets from the Danish Merchant Marine.
Great shot of the fireboat, red, white, and blue water spewing forth, and here comes the Eagle. We've got a great shot of the Eagle now from our vantage point, atop Anthony's Pier 4 on the harbor.
There you see it right there, right in the center of your screen.
Right. You can see her racing stripe, the Coast Guard racing stripe, actually our identification signal on the hull. And she's under full sail with the exception on her foremast and mainmast. She has her lowest squaresail up in its gear. That's the foresail and the mainsail.
You know, we should point out, too, as we look at the Eagle, that there are 6 other vessels in the first flotilla. Among them, the Spirit of Massachusetts, a Class B boat.
She's an old Gloucester schooner of the Fernandina design and does a lot of sail training for the New England Historic Seaport. The master on that vessel is an old third mate of mine, Bobby Hall. I had Bobby on the Sea Cloud for a year and as my third mate, and now he's master of the Spirit of Massachusetts.
You know, there's an old saying in broadcasting, Red, you know, the world is made up of 300 people and you spend your life running into them. It must be the same in your circles.
Certainly is, certainly is. You can see the upper works, upper sails of the Spirit right now.
Topsail schooner.
That's right.
Built in 1984, carries a crew of 30. She'll be berthed at Charlestown Pier 3 for those that might like to take a look at her. Our colleague Pam Cross has got an interesting position along this route. She's at Bay State Lobster. Pam, are you there?
Yes, Natalie. Good morning.
How's it look from your angle?
Oh, it looks great. We're ready in the inner harbor. There are thousands of people alongside me on the Coast Guard dock and several thousand more across the way at the Charlestown Navy Yard. And the Eagle, as you noted, is on her way up. She's beginning to pull the sails in. I guess, what do you call that, Red? Putting the sails in gear? Is that
right, they're
stowing them?
No,
Yeah.
not yet stowing
Not
them. They're going to put them in their gear. They're going to haul around on their buntlins, leechlins, and clewlins, and they're going to take in the sails, getting them ready for stowing and furling.
Good for you,
Now-
Pam. You had that right.
It's a whole other language you have to learn.
There's another term, the advance and turn. Now that's what we're working on. To us laymen, it's a U-turn. Most of these tall ships have to turn around and head off to their berthing spots. So that's what we're waiting for.
I know the captains of these vessels must be grateful that the people of Massachusetts haven't installed any rotaries or roundabouts in the harbor. Red, can you identify the vessel we're looking at right now?
She looks like a Baltic trader there. I think it might be the Ark, a Class C vessel there.
She was in the flotilla number 2, which was led by the Krusenstern. We saw going by here just a while ago.
Just interrupt you a second so people know what we're looking at there, Chet. That was the Gloria you saw, which is leading the third flotilla of ships as it comes past here, the Gloria from Columbia. And this was, if you were with us earlier, Red was describing this ship as one of the newer ones that has some of the newer equipment, newer technology on board.
Yes, Natalie. She's has some great subdivision, things like that.
She also, I understand, the Columbia. There you go. As a matter of fact, it just came on the screen. She has a museum of Columbian artifacts below decks, and some people who will have an opportunity to go aboard Gloria, as she is berthed here at the World Trade Center, will have an opportunity to see that.
Yes, Chet. They have a nice museum on board.
And this one, unlike so many of the other ships, was designed specifically as a sail training vessel, reminiscent of some of the medium clipper ships, I guess, of the 19th century.
Right. She's one of the 5 vessels that the South American countries have built in the last 20 years.
The overall shot of Boston Harbor. Scene today of Sail Boston 92. Close to 250 vessels from over 30 foreign countries. An extraordinary assembly of some of the greatest sailing vessels in the world.
Well, the tall ships were certainly the stars of today's parade, but they were hardly the only boats in the harbor. There were literally thousands of small pleasure boats of every size and variety carrying sightseers and people watching the tall ships. Many of them now, almost 10 hours after the parade began, just now beginning to leave. Of course, they were under orders from the Coast Guard to remain in place, so a lot of them are probably very much out of refreshments. The return of the tall ships. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us. Today's Parade of Sail in Boston Harbor was the largest maritime event ever in New England. So let's run up the sails, hoist the yardarm, and get back to the parade.
We're looking at the Frederick Chopin, 182 feet in length, captained by Chris Baranowski. It's built this year as part of a new generation of tall ships.
Right, Chet. She was built in Poland and has been chartered out by a Scottish sail training group. So there's quite a few Scots aboard, and they're sailing across in this Grand Regatta. She's one of the more modern ones.
And let's welcome Boston Mayor Ray Flynn, who joins us here at Anthony's Pier 4. Mr. Mayor, welcome. I know you've had an opportunity to get a bird's eye view of the activity here, both from a helicopter, and you've been at several other locations. Give us your impressions.
Seeing the tall ships coming into the inner harbor of Boston, I think, you know, with all the countries that are represented, you still get goose pimples.
You do.
When the Constitution comes in, and maybe it's because we're Americans, and if you don't mind me saying so, maybe it's we're proud because of being Bostonians as well.
Good shot of the Libertad now. The weather has turned out just spectacular. The blue skies are beginning to show here after a morning of some concern, because it was well, more clouds than we'd like to see. We're looking at the Niagara, a Class A boat, 198 feet in length, a brig rather. She's the only ship of her type which is still in existence from the War of 1812. Built in 1813, completely restored in 1990. Niagara is the flagship of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yes, Chet, she's a wonderful restoration of an original ship that Oliver Hazard Perry in the Battle of Lake Erie came up with. The master of the vessel, Walter Ripka, is an old shipmate of mine. He served as my chief mate aboard the Alyssa. So there's another old shipmate out there who I've sailed with before, Walter Ripka. Who's
you know, just one other bit of history before we introduce our next guest. Niagara carried the flag, "Don't give up the ship," and it was from this victory that Perry wrote, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours."
That's correct.
And she has the distinction of being the tall ship on the Great Lakes today.
Yes, she's,
the Niagara.
The U.S. flagship Eagle is making her way to her berth at the Black Falcon Pier. Our Byron Pitts is aboard with a very special guest. Byron?
Chet, now, you mentioned there are a number of VIPs on board today, and there's one gentleman here who doesn't really need an introduction, Walter Cronkite. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you doing?
A lover of the sea that's been well documented. Your thoughts on this day?
Well, it's a magnificent day, a wonderful festival of sail for Boston to put on. Obviously, the people of Boston have turned out. There's hardly room for another boat to anchor out here on the long parade of sail coming in. And every one of these docks, every bit of shore space seems to be filled with spectators. It's quite a marvelous day.
Now, you've been aboard the Eagle since New York.
Yeah.
Your thoughts about the crew? I mean, I've been very impressed by the young men and women aboard. I mean, they seem very dedicated. And
That's a marvelous class of cadets, class of 95, which is the class aboard here right now. A wonderful class and a great bunch of people. I've had the advantage of being on Eagle several times over the years, and I think this is one of the finest group of cadets I've seen from the Academy, although they're all great. And one of the marvelous things about them is that it's, you know, about a third of the cadets now on board here are women, more women in each class at the Academy, and they carry a full load of duty.
Joining us now is David Brink, who is co-chairman of the American Sail Training Association. They're headquartered in Newport. Dave's from Bath, Maine, and just returned from OpSail, New York. And he and other members of the American Sail Training Association will have special displays all week long while the tall ships are in Boston. And David, as we say hello to you, we're looking at the Danmark.
Right.
Great vessel.
One of the most famous of all the tall ships, Chet. The big story about Denmark was she was interned in this country in World War II. She was volunteered to our government by the captain, who wouldn't take her back to Europe. And she served in service all through the war, training our military at New London, and was really the spark for the impetus to get the Eagle as a war prize and institute her as a sail training program, which of course Red knows about.
We want to go down to the Fish Pier, the site of the official reviewing stand, where governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is standing by, Governor William Weld.
What's your reaction today? No hardball questions today. What's your reaction?
This is like one great big party, and I can handle that. I think this is putting Boston and Massachusetts on the map, the international map, which is also fine with me. We're one of only 2 ports where these ships are coming, and it's part of our grand strategy to make Boston the capital of the Atlantic Rim.
And you had an opportunity to get out on the water this morning and do a little tour of the harbor. How did things look to you from there?
They look fabulous. I mean, this is the best organized major event I've seen in a long time. This is going off without a hitch. We placed Lieutenant Governor Cellucci in charge of the weather, and he blew a whistle, and the sun came out from behind the cloud just when the first tall ship came into the harbor.
Well, I heard some round of applause down here, and I thought something spectacular was going on. It's just somebody saying hello to a friend going by
Very good.
on one of the on the spectator feed. But it was just fascinating to. I said, "What tall ship have we missed here?"
I'd like to see a shot of Gazella.
Can we get Gazella? The Gazella of Philadelphia.
And right behind her is the Rose, the HMS Rose.
Yes, they're coming up shortly there, the Rose. Gazella is a real fine vessel, one of the oldest wooden vessels in the fleet. She was an old Portuguese salt banker for many years, and now is owned by the group in Philadelphia for sail training. Originally the Gazella Primero, and now the Gazella of Philadelphia.
Interesting, Red, that they've spent $1 million on her this year, just this spring, getting ready for this series to make her seaworthy. And they have a great group of volunteers who've done a tremendous job bringing along their sail training program. And they have great hopes for the future.
I think it's a real fine program, and we wish them all the luck in the world.
Right.
A light yellow hull is kind of unusual, too. It makes her stand out.
That's the HMS Rose, and she's a 5th-rate frigate replica of a vessel that actually fought against us in the Revolutionary War. She was particularly active in boycotting all the trade and the piracy in the English eyes that was going down in Newport Harbor. And she's been completely rebuilt. And she was built in, I think, the 50s or 60s, completely rebuilt now. And her captain has the interesting distinction of being the smallest captain on the biggest wooden square rig ship, Richard Bailey. And Richard's a very good friend of ours, a very strong sail trainer. And this program is the first large wooden ship to be certified under the Sailing School Vessels Act, able to carry passengers for hire. And Chet, as we were saying, this is one of the ships that if you call up the Rose, you can actually get on this boat and sail for a week or 2. The tuition's fairly nominal, running, I believe, about $60 or $70 a day.
You know, I neglected to ask you, I'm sorry, Natalie, earlier when we were talking about sail training and we were talking about young people and floating classrooms, I should point out that not all of these opportunities to sail are limited to young people.
Not at all. One of the things that we've found in sailing the Alyssa in Galveston, Texas, and I know it's true of the Rose and the Gazella, the best crews that we've experienced are what we call mixed crews, the youth of all ages, where you have 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds mixed up with middle-aged people, mixed up with people who are in their senior years.
Young 50-year-olds.
That's right. And the most interesting point, I think, is that generally speaking, often in these situations, the people are not related. Therefore, the interactions are very clean. It isn't father and son or mother and daughter. It's a woman who might be in her 50s relating to a 20-year-old, and they have to do so straight up as they meet each other, stand, watch, clean the galley out. There's a lot of tasks that make for a lot of growing in those situations.
Didn't I read it was the Rose that her sails are made of recycled materials?
Yes.
Right.
Rose just had a wonderful experience with DuPont, which has invented this new material which comes out of all kinds of recycled plastics, and they made sailcloth out of it, and North Sails built these sails out of junk, if you will, and it's a brand new set of sails right now.
That's wonderful.
You're looking at the Libertad from Buenos Aires, Argentina. A full-rigged frigate, 340 feet in length, and a beauty she is.
Yes, Chet, she's a real handsome sailor, real handsome sailor.
Did you mention her clipper bow with the ornate figurehead of a woman there? I remember that from years back when she was here.
Yes, she's has the ornate figure and also a coat of arms of Argentina on the stern.
She is, though, one of the largest of the vessels in the Tall Ships Parade today, and she's won numerous awards.
There you go. There you can see that. See that on the bow? You can kind of make that out.
You know, the interesting
With
thing
the
about
flowing
the
robes.
figurehead is that from time immemorial, it's been thought of as the eyes of the ship, and has always protected the ships, looking out ahead and seeing what's out in front of it. And all kinds of myth and characters have been portrayed on the bows of ships.
There's a lot of superstition that goes along
Right.
with sailing, isn't there? I can understand why.
Well, sailors are quite superstitious and very tradition-bound.
David Ropeek aboard the Valiant Lady. David, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, Chester, we can. We're aboard the Valiant Lady. We're, 2 or 3 miles off Deer Island, just behind us. We're way out where the flotillas are forming up and beginning their parade. And as we come about a little bit and head into a boat to talk to some people, I don't know whether you can make out, but across the way from us and all the way down, miles and miles it seems, all the way to Nahant. This place is just thick with pleasure boats, and everyone's been honking their horns as the boats go by and having quite a time, including these people here. If my cameraman can get a shot at Bradwell on the Walter Marie II, which has been anchored. This is real. We're finally on there, Joel. Let me hop out of the way. Let's see. What do you think of the show?
Beautiful show today. Never going to see anything like this again for a long time.
How come you're not out lobstering?
We're giving the lobsters a chance to regroup, and we'll go get them tomorrow.
Let me ask another young lady here on the back of the boat. What do you think of the show so far?
I think it's wonderful.
Yeah? Do you think he would have had a chance of working today, or was this going to be where the boat had to be?
This had to be where the boat be.
Any problem with staying out this long?
No. Love it.
Any favorites?
Oh, I don't know. Chile.
The Chilean boat, the Esmeralda. Yeah, it was beautiful.
There's a pretty aqua one coming down there, too. Next to the Constitution.
Next to the Constitution, one person says with a tear in her eye.
From way back, I'm a loyalist.
A loyalist from way back. God bless you. Thank you very much, folks. Enjoy the day.
You too.
There are boats like this. There are small boats. There are people fishing as they watch the show go by. There are yachts of 150 feet in length. A lot of these people are really out on working or pleasure craft. Not too many of the big charter boats. Most of the boats that are out here seem to be pleasure craft. And they're seeing quite a spectacular show. Some of these boats are coming by with their sails already out, this far out, before they've even made the turn into President Rhodes, firing their cannons, many of them are. And from where we can see in the staging area, which is actually in the other direction, there are boats literally off Revere, waiting in line. The Amerigo Vespucci and the Tovarish, the last ones to lead flotillas in, are waiting patiently for their turn in line. It's quite a show from this vantage point. And I have to add one reflection that has struck me when I first came to Boston some years ago and read up a little bit on the history. I saw some old pictures of what the harbor looked like. And it was thick with these masted schooners, and it was a very romantic looking thing. And I think this is as close as any of us is ever going to get to seeing what the harbor really looked like when Boston was first forming into the city that it's now become. Back to you, Chet and Nat.
All right, David, well said.
You're looking at the Mir here, I believe.
Yes, the Mir, Natalie, a Class A vessel, 361 feet in length, a square rigger from St. Petersburg, Russia.
She's a sister ship to Darmojizi, the Polish vessel.
One of the recent ones, too, just built the Darmojizi, which we'll see a little later. It was built in 1987. Mir, we've heard that name, certainly, in reference to things Russian, because it's the name of the Russian space station, and it means peace.
Right.
She has a white hull, three-masted, square-rigged ship, and like the Darmojizi, Mir has an unusually flat transom, which is, I guess, a little bit unusual for vessels.
Not one of the most handsome transoms in the world, but it comes out of the modern Polish tradition. All their vessels, we just saw Kaliakra go by, a much smaller vessel, but much the same hull design.
This tall ship is used as a sail training vessel for the merchant Navy officers and seamen from the Commonwealth of Independent States.
And this is her first voyage to the United States, taking part in this grand regatta of the celebration of Columbus, the 500th anniversary of Columbus's voyage.
And welcome. Most of the people who go aboard these tall ships at their berths in Boston Harbor over the next week will probably remark how tight the sleeping quarters are. And no doubt the sailing cadets aboard the tall ships do not cruise in luxury. On the other hand, today's sailors don't have to suffer the cold, the heat, and the disease of the ancient mariner. And of course, we know today that the earth isn't all that flat. More of the tall ships right after this. Watching today's parade of sail was a rare opportunity to travel back in time, really. And early in the parade, when a replica of a 15th century caravel sailed by, it was an opportunity to travel all the way back to the age of discovery, the age of sail. It was an age that was explored by restless men, some desperate, some discontented, all of them pioneers.
We're looking at the Concordia, the flagship of Canada, one of the newest boats built in 1991 in the shipyards of Gdansk.
And Chet, as we're watching that ship, let's just whip down to Susan Warnick and Dick Albert, who are on not Long Island, Castle Island, with a group of spectators who are watching. They should have a great view right now of the Concordia.
Oh, yes.
Perfect.
We've been watching the tall ships come in, and the crowd is thickening here. There's no question about it. It's finally getting warmer. People are finally smiling at me this morning. I can't.
One of the best parts here today are the people, right?
Absolutely,
the people.
the people.
Absolutely. The people from South Boston and Medford and East Boston, as well as Florida and Ireland and England, and they've just been...
From Ireland,
From
right?
Ireland, yeah. Where's the Ireland group? Come on over. Where are the folks from
Oh,
Ireland?
you're from Boston, we thought.
You're from Ireland.
Yeah, living in Germany, Munich. So I come all the way from Munich to get here.
To see this?
Yeah, I got my friend here from London, Maggie, as well.
And when did you get here?
Oh, about a week ago. We've been on the Cape, now we're here.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Oh, it's great. I've been in the mountains the last year and a half. I got to see the ocean.
What do you think of Boston?
I love Boston. I've been coming here all the time, so I really like it. I like Cape Cod, Boston. It's great.
And the Bostonians have been pretty good to you?
Yeah, they've been really good to me, especially because I'm Irish.
So you found one or two friends?
Absolutely. That's why I come back here. A lot of friends of mine are living here, so I come back to visit them.
That's great. I hope you have a terrific time. Chet, Natalie?
All right, Susan and Dick, thanks very much. Dickie, that forecast worked out just as you assured us it would.
Sail Boston 1992, these magnificent sailing ships representing another era, but also a time of today. While we go through telling you some of the stories of what we know of was life aboard these ships many years ago, we're also reminded that most of these square riggers are sail training ships for their various countries. You're looking there at the Polish ship, Dar Młodzieży. How'd I do, Chet?
That's not bad, Natalie. She's out of Gdynia, Poland, a Class A vessel and a new one. Dar Młodzieży, by the way, translates to gift of youth. It was built, we said, in the Gdansk shipyard, and that is the birthplace not only of these wonderful tall ships, but it is the birthplace of the Solidarity movement. That's the shipyard where Lech Wałęsa worked.
Yes.
It used to be called the Lenin shipyard. It is now simply called the Gdansk shipyard, and there is a monument outside that shipyard, and I had the pleasure of visiting that spot a few years ago to the men of Solidarity who were killed in the uprising and who began the movement that eventually led to the collapse of communism in Poland and elsewhere in Eastern Europe.
Daisy Nell Coffin is with us from the Peabody Museum of Salem, and we were talking earlier about some life at sea for the men. How about the role of women, how that has changed?
Well,
there was a time when there certainly weren't women as sailors.
There were. I mean, even, when I was a little girl, I remember my grandmother sailed on a schooner, believe it or not. And she used to worry about what kind of undergarment she was going to wear when she climbed the rigging. And
well, that was a concern.
It was a concern. Nowadays, these cadets, a lot, you know, when I was working on a schooner, you just wear what you wear. But times have changed. In the old days, of course, a lot of women didn't go to sea, and they stayed home and took care of things on land. And there's a great old story of a skipper's wife who was staying on land, taking care of the kids and the farm. And when he came back, and they went down to the dock to see him off, and one of his mates said, "Well, you didn't even kiss her goodbye." And he said, "Well, I'm only going to be gone a year."
These wonderful sailing vessels from more than 30 countries continue to make their way through Boston Harbor and past the reviewing stand at the Fish Pier. And in just a moment, we'll have a good look at the Pride of Baltimore II. It's a pretty boat, Red, and a relatively new one.
Yes, she's a new vessel. The previous Pride went down in 1987, was sailed under off the Atlantic there, and the loss of life.
As I recall, Red, the original Pride of Baltimore sank in a squall in the Bermuda Triangle, but it was more than just a squall. It was one of those microbursts or downdrafts of energy that has actually caused a couple of airplane accidents.
Yes, they got into a very severe line squall. They had quite a bit of canvas up there, and it was the survivors figure it was a microburst.
And that was something that came and went in under 20 minutes.
That's right.
Yeah, unpredictable.
Unbelievable.
Not much you could have done about it. There's nothing they could have done about it. It was just one of those.
One of the survivors said, you know, that they were in the midst of this horrible storm, and then within seconds they saw sunshine and calm seas all of a sudden.
Yes, this Gorge Fock out in front of you there on the screen, German sail training vessel. Sister ship to Eagle and Sagres in Tavares.
I'm just thrilled they were able to come in here under sail. One of these, I can't remember which year it was, that we covered one of these tall ship events, and the weather was such that there were no sails up. And it makes such a difference.
Oh, look at that.
You're looking here at pictures of the Esmeralda from Chile.
She has a long forecastle deck there.
Wow, is that magnificent?
Right. And she's a barkentine there.
Wouldn't want to do that in 12 or 15-foot swells, Red, huh?
No, no.
The Esmeralda from Chile, four-masted topsail schooner, carries a crew of some 244. She's over 370 feet long. A Class A tall ship.
She was, Natalie, she was built in Spain in the 50s and built by the Spanish government. Her original name was Don Juan of Austria, after the old Habsburg Empire there. And she was used as a Spanish naval training vessel, and a fire broke out in a shipyard period and almost totally wiped her out. She was purchased by the Chilean government, brought back to Chile, and refurbished, and is now their naval training vessel.
Everything is going along beautifully as the parade of sail continues in Boston Harbor.
What a pretty picture.
Just hundreds and hundreds of spectator boats and tens of thousands of people lining pedestrians who are walking along Northern Avenue, coming in to find a place along the Boston Harbor shores here to get a better look at the tall ships. Most of them will not be open to board today because it'll be late in the afternoon by the time they get into their berthing areas and tie up, and then they have to tidy up. So it'll be it won't be until tomorrow that we'll be able to go aboard some of these vessels for those of you who are interested in doing that.
But you can, as you said, Chet, get a good look at them as they come into their berths there. It's just a terrific place to be able to see and talk with some of the folks, some of the people on board the ships. You know, the next time this is there's going to be a parade of sail of this magnitude, as I'm told, is the year 2000, and there's a great deal of bartering going on among the ports of the world here. Who will get all the tall ships as we turn 2000?
There's a tremendous effort involved to put this all together, not only to secure the agreement from the various governments involved to get their tall ships here, but also a tremendous effort on the part of the city, the state, and federal agencies to take care of coordinating not only the boat traffic, but the pedestrian traffic, to make some accommodation for the possibility of injuries, for placing these hundreds and hundreds of porta potties around the harbor. I mean, little things that you wouldn't think
Details
of. Telephones, public telephones, as we look at the Esmeralda. One interesting thing I think is worth acknowledging, Sprint has made provisions for all of the sailors from the foreign ships to make 1 3-minute call home. Each of the sailors will have an opportunity to do that.
Another example of the corporations pitching in here.
It's
I think that's
a
terrific.
combination of old and new technology. It's a perfect example of
Really?
some of the oldest technology and some of the newest.
Good point. This whole effort to pull this thing off has been going on for about 4 years here, led by the Sail Boston folks, most notably Dusty Rhodes, and hopefully she and some of the people she's been working with over these many years will join us this afternoon, because as Red knows, we've been working closely with Sail Boston. The stories are just incredible. I mean, there was no one place you called and say, "Hi, we're going to have a parade of sail. Would you like to come?" You had to write
send me a
to
dozen tall ships.
Right. You had to write to each individual country and sail training organization, and then they followed it up with the personal trips around the world to convince the various captains to come here and to do this thing. It was an extraordinary feat. And then I might add, there was a considerable diplomatic effort right here at home to pull all of the factions, state and local, together to pitch in, because there was a time 3-4 years ago when people said, "What, tall ships? Come on, not going to happen." And suddenly, you know, it all was going to happen, and there was a scramble. And typically I think of this city, as we have seen so many times when we've done these mega events, it happens, it works, and people do pull together. Speaking of Sail Boston people, I see one Sail Boston hat over there. We're going to pull over here and say hello.
One prominent Sail Boston person, but you're right, it's a tremendous organizational effort, and I know And we'll hear from Natalie said, from some of the Sail Boston organizers that even once they had the agreements with the various governments, there's still a great concern that maybe they won't show up. Some of these agreements were signed, sealed, and delivered, a couple of years ago. There's also, you're talking about, there's always some criticism of events like this, and someone will always say, big deal, what about so what, the tall ships, they were here, I had a look at them. But it's not always that you get a look at them. I'm reminded of a quote that Tony Chamberlain, who writes an outdoors column in the Boston Globe, he made note of various cynics, some cynics who might criticize an event like this. And Tony Chamberlain said this weekend's visit of the tall ships will be over-promoted, over-reported, and it might be a politically incorrect pain in the mizzen, but I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Good way to put it.
I thought so, too. The parade of sail continues. We have 19 flotillas in total. They're on number 9 right now, and as I have mentioned a couple of times, it'll be 4 o'clock or somewhat after 4 this afternoon by the time all of the ships have made their way past the reviewing stand at the Boston Fish Pier and tie up at their various berths throughout Boston Harbor. Some of the bigger vessels, the Class A vessels, will be at the Black Falcon Pier. There's some here at Commonwealth Pier, adjacent to Anthony's Pier 4, near the World Trade Center. And just virtually every foot of dock space along the harbor is being utilized this weekend.
If we see the Chilean ship Esmeralda again moving slowly up the inner harbor there, with their cadets manning the bowsprit and also manning some of the yards up there.
This is an extraordinary assemblage of vessels in Boston Harbor. For many of the ships, it is their maiden voyage to Boston. Some of them are new, some of them have been around here before and in operations past.
Right, Chet. It's amazing the amount of new vessels with this Grand Regatta that's come across the ocean as compared to 1980. A larger force of vessels and many, many new ones.
There are lots of, not every ship that you're looking at on your television screen here is a so-called tall ship, but clearly the tall ships are the stars of the show for this Sail Boston Regatta, which actually began months and months ago in Genoa, Italy.
Right, Chet. They started off in the springtime in Genoa and sailed through the Mediterranean up to Lisbon. Then they raced from Cadiz down to the Canaries, and the Canaries to San Juan, and then onward.
And then to New York, and then in company, all of the boats cruised to Boston Harbor.
All the ships we're watching, like the Esmeralda, are of course parading and slowly into Boston Harbor, doing about 5 knots today, or roughly 6 miles an hour. So it might be a little easy to forget that under full sail on the open seas, these ships can also cruise mighty impressively. We'll return to more of the tall ships right after these messages.
It has turned into an absolutely gorgeous day in Boston after a cloudy start and just a little bit of concern about the weather, but right now it just couldn't be more perfect. There's enough of a breeze to allow the beautiful tall ships to rig full sails in most cases, and yet the wind is not stiff enough to cause any concern, and here we are. It's just great.
Yes, that's the Sagres you have up ahead of you there. We can see on the screen. And she's, you can see the Portuguese crosses of Christ on her square sails there, the red crosses of Christ.
David, tell us a little more about the sail training and what goes on here, what we try and teach these young people.
Well, Natalie, the big thing that we see here is the spectacle of these ships coming through the harbor, but the real work that they do day in, day out around the world is teaching young people and not so young people, the youth of all ages as we call them, the importance, you're right, the importance of going to sea and the lessons that can be learned there. That is to be a better person both at sea and ashore, to work well with your shipmates and the people that you work with in your regular life, and then of course to be responsible for our ocean planet. And it is important to remember that this is an ocean planet, about 3/4 of which is covered by water, and we have a great responsibility to keep it clean and safe.
Many of the countries who have sail training associations, sail training programs, use these programs as training ground for their future diplomats.
Right.
Royalty, members of royalty, they'll send their young kids on these ships to teach them discipline primarily.
I think the interesting thing is all the way from the upper echelons to the very lowest, we go all the way down to programs that teach adjudicated youth how to get back on the right track. So the big point is sail training can affect everyone's life, young, old, male, female, rich, poor, whether they're American or Russian. There's a great commonality of value here.
We're looking at the Sagres II, the flagship of Portugal, and some of the cadets manning the yards, as the saying goes. Sagres is the name of a rocky point of land that juts out off the southwest coast of Portugal. And she is one of the vessels that you see and almost participates in virtually all of these parades of sail all around the world, Red.
Right. The Portuguese were great navigators, and you mentioned Sagres Point. That's where Prince Henry the Navigator had his observatory and sent his Portuguese mariners all around the world.
And you know, the word tall ship is something of a misnomer, right? Red and David can verify here. The first sailing race, first major regatta, it was kind of coined at that time to indicate basically any sailboat with a tall mast. Am I right? Or close to that.
We often talk about tall ships and not so tall ships to include everybody, and the ships that are small, the Class B and the Class C ships, they're just as important as the big international Class A's. They're doing a lot of training.
And the A's, B's, and C's are designated or distinguished by their length. 170 feet and over is an A, 100 to 170 feet a B, and under 100 so-called Class C boat.
As you can probably tell from those live pictures in Boston Harbor, the breeze has picked up a little bit here since, in the last half hour.
Right, Chet. The front has gone through, and she's blowing a good stiff breeze out of the northwest there, so it should be good sailing.
Does this make it easier or more difficult to maneuver in formation into Boston Harbor for the turnaround and then back out? What would you say, Red?
Well, it'll make it a little more difficult for the turnaround, but they'll be able to handle it. They have plenty of tug assistance up there.
That ship we just left was the Captain Miranda, and this here is the Juan Sebastian del Cano.
Right. Spain's very famous topsail schooner. She's really a sister ship to the Esmeralda, which went by just a little while ago. A slight difference in rig, but two magnificent vessels, about 360 feet long. Very proud symbols for their countries.
And the Del Cano, we're told, one of the few training ships ever to sail entirely around the world.
Around the world, yep.
We're here with Don Curtis, the Director of Marine Operations for Sail Boston 92. Don, earlier this morning there was some concern that the largest of the tall ships, the Sedov from the Commonwealth of Independent States, was missing. I understand she's been located. Any idea what happened?
She's located and she has formed up for the parade, but we had a restless night wondering where she was. She wasn't answering any radio calls, and as I heard you say earlier, she was AWOL for all intents and purposes.
Kind of hard to imagine a missing 400-foot boat.
We actually almost sent a helicopter up to, go try to find her someplace, because we had a lot of anxious people that were looking forward to her arriving into the anchorage.
Oh, for the benefit of our audience now, a number of people today, when these boats finally finish the parade of sail and tie up at various berths at Boston Harbor, they will not be open to the public, but they will tomorrow. Can you give us briefly what that's going to be like for the next couple of days?
Actually, there are a couple that may be open this afternoon, but for the most part, the vessels will be open between noon and 5 from Sunday to Wednesday. Obviously, the times of open viewing is up to the discretion of the captains, but we have sort of requested that they are all open from 12 to 5 each day. Most of them will be open for more hours than that, and of course the piers are open from first thing in the morning until 11 o'clock at night in most of the berthing locations. So
there's our AWOL ship, Don.
There is the Sedov, Don, the one that we were looking for.
There it is.
Long. Well, we're happy to say that everything is okay.
She can travel pretty quickly, can't she, for one of these tall ships? 13,
Yes.
14 knots, and isn't she stronger than some of the others?
Yeah, she's the largest sailing vessel in the world. Her hull speed will get up around 14 to 15 knots.
And how about this for a number? 4,100 square meters of sail, which
Right,
is
that's
fully
a lot of
rigged.
canvas up there.
She is entering the tall ship race here, North Sea race for the first time, or she did rather, in 1986. We've got great shot of her there. And as we said, we're just so grateful that Mother Nature cooperated here and gave us the right winds to allow these beautiful ships to come in here under sail. Look at that. Who's that up there, Red?
Well, one of the hands up there checking the gear out on the yard there. He's working out on the foot ropes, hanging his belly over the yard, probably checking some loose gear up there.
And hanging on tight. By the way, one of the more impressive feats of the day happened on land, where hundreds of thousands of spectators managed to get into the city, get a glimpse of history, and get along with no major problems. Talk about smooth sailing. More on the tall ships when we return. You may not be aware, but today's parade of tall ships is also part of a larger transatlantic race that commemorates the 500th anniversary of Columbus's voyage to the New World. And now our quest continues here, the return of the tall ships.
While we're looking at the setup, it gives us another opportunity to reintroduce Howard Slotnick.
A New York businessman who's been very much involved with these tall ships for some time now. He twice directed Operation Sail of the Tall Ships Parade in New York, including back in 1976 when they were the bad guys.
Well, the Russians, that is, not the New York.
No, right, sorry. You know, we've mentioned a couple of times, Howard, the problems that the Russians have had after the breakup of the Soviet Union as relates to these ships. One of them being a very real economic one, right down to feeding the crew. And you know about that, and that from some years back.
Well, their problem is not so much that they had no food, they had very little food. And of course what happened is that they just don't have the hard funds. These ships, when they go around the world, cannot stock enough food for the whole trip. So they need hard currency on board to be able to buy food in each one of the ports. When I was down in San Juan, I was on board the Krusenstern. Captain Kolometsky, who was an old friend, I sailed on Krusenstern in 1974, and he started telling me that he was not scheduled to be here. He heard about the celebration, the 500th anniversary in the Canary Islands, where he happened to be at the time, and he said he had to come to New York. He had to come and help celebrate because he felt that Krusenstern was in the forefront of perestroika. And I kind of looked at him, I said, well, why? He said, well, you don't realize, but when you invited us in 76 and when we came in 76, you were the enemy. He said, we had been taught, our cadets had always been taught that Americans were the enemy. Yet when we got to New York, we found out Americans really weren't our enemy. They were our friends. Governments had some disagreements, but the people treated them so well. So he said, what happened was when we decided to come, we had very little funds. But we knew that we would get help along the way. And in fact, when they got to San Juan, the Puerto Ricans were there, and they helped and they put food on board. And he told me, when I get to New York, I need somebody to help. We ended up putting 10 tons of produce on board the ships, a ton and a half of chicken, a ton of dairy products, well over a ton of bakery products, flour,
All these
necessity.
gifts from American companies?
All these gifts from American companies. The list that I brought back a provision list. I've sailed all my life. I don't know how to feed 250 people on board.
Not many do.
Red Shannon does.
That's a remarkable story, Howard. You know, and it's at the risk of sounding overly dramatic, I guess, it's part of the magic of one of these events that is difficult to transmit over television or radio as we sit here trying to describe what's going on in Boston Harbor. You know, we talk about the international meeting place for 7,000 young men and women from all over the world, representing 34 countries. I mean, it's just incredible.
One of the great things about these events, and we found in New York in 76 and 86, the feelings are so great that crime takes a holiday. In 1976 and 1986, crime actually took a holiday over the Opsail weekend. There were 2 million people in Lower Manhattan, and there wasn't one arrest.
I have noticed that, and how many times we have covered events of this magnitude with so many people being so close together. You find people are polite. Someone who might yesterday have screamed, "Get out of my way," says, "Excuse me." It's very nice.
People on the subway, when the event was over, after the fireworks, people in shorts, people in full dress tuxedos coming from the fairs and events, started singing "God Bless America"
Isn't that
in a
great?
crowded subway car.
They give you some goosebumps.
And I got to tell you, that does give you goosebumps.
Pam Cross of our staff is over at the Black Falcon, where a number of these magnificent sailing ships will be berthed. In fact, a couple of them, I think, are already there. Pam, can you hear us?
Oh, Natalie, yes, I can. You know, actually, I'm at Bay State Lobster, right on the inner harbor where they're doing the turnaround, and I've got a new appreciation for the workings of the harbor. Boston's a harbor city. You don't often think about the work that tugboats do. There are 2 tugboat companies involved in helping to turn around these tall ships that have volunteered their services, and they have worked extra hard. We are looking at about the 11th flagship right now that they're just beginning to turn around. This is the Juan Sebastian de Elcano from Spain. It's a Spanish ship, and there is a tug, one at the bow, one at the stern, and they just give it a little push. They keep pressing gently until she gets around there. I had an opportunity to talk to one of the tugboat operators about exactly what they do when they approach one of the tall ships. Let's listen to him now.
For each one, we believe we're going to put a docking master on, one of our people. That'll avoid the language barrier, and it will make things go a lot smoother. If somebody loses an engine or something like that, then a tugboat will take them alongside. And they'll most probably continue the parade and make their circles, and everything will still go fairly smooth.
It's been a pretty interesting operation to watch. Most of them have gone as smoothly as this one, the Juan Sebastian de Elcano, spinning around on its axis right here in front of us. There have been a couple, though. There was one there where they really stopped for quite a while, a couple of minutes, and seemed to have to bring in a little extra power to move it around. But for the most part, the operation has gone smoothly. The rest of the flotilla has to either slow down or stop while this is going on. And for this ship, the Spanish ship, they are all stopped waiting. I understand that this whole operation, each flotilla is supposed to take about 12 to 15 minutes to turn around and move. And they seem to be going pretty much on schedule.
With so much high technology on the high seas today, it's worth remembering that training cadets on the tall ships still learn navigation the old-fashioned way, by the stars, which of course is what their sailing forebears relied on. So let's return now to those monuments to self-reliance, the tall ships.
Prince Philip will be coming here to take part in these festivities on Monday. The Prince will arrive Monday, the Duke of Edinburgh, and he'll be visiting the USS Constitution along with Governor Weld of Massachusetts. He'll attend the ball at Symphony Hall in Boston on Monday night. And Tuesday he's going to visit 2 of these grand vessels, the British Lord Trenchard and Poland's Frederick Chopin. And he'll be giving out, I understand, some sail training awards when he comes. And as always, when royalty from various countries, especially Great Britain, comes, there is a protocol sheet that is handed out. And we're asked to pass along information such as when a woman greets the prince, she's supposed to half curtsy. When a man meets the prince, he should bow. So, gentlemen.
Okay, duly noted.
David Ropig is out at one of our camera positions. David?
And we're about to talk to Warrant Officer Buddy Blackman, who has been helping run things off the back of the White Heath. Buddy, we'll start to shout the questions as we come along. How have things gone from the Coast Guard perspective?
Very fine, very well, smooth. Everybody's staying where they should. We haven't had any problems with anybody moving around like they shouldn't be. It's a very nice day.
Any problems with accidents or anything on the water that you know of?
No, none's been reported to us.
Everybody behaving? I mean, have there been challenges to the Coast Guard?
No, sir.
What would you estimate for the crowd? Is there any way to know?
Say in this sector here is probably about 12,000 boats.
You ever see anything this complicated go this smooth?
No, sir.
Surprised?
No, sir. They had a well-planned effort here. They've been working on this for 2 years.
I think everything has gone remarkably well. We're looking at the Captain Miranda making her way through the harbor.
Right, Chet. Captain Miranda is an Uruguayan vessel, a 3-masted schooner, and she carries a crew of 102. She's used for sail training by the Uruguayan Navy, and she was named after the commandant or head of the Uruguayan Navy many years ago in the 19th century, who was a hydrographer or oceanographer. And the ship was used by the Uruguayan Navy as a hydrographic ship until 1978. And now she's a sail training vessel.
Read that says this particular boat is one of the few Class A vessels with a modern schooner rig.
That's right, Chet. She does have a fore and aft rig as compared to a square rig.
Looking at the Christian Radich, 240-foot Class A 3-masted full-rigged ship. Another beauty, Red.
Yes, Christian Radich from Norway. a full-rigged ship, has interesting history. Just recently, she was the Class A winner from Cadiz to San Juan in the Grand Regatta coming across the Atlantic. During the war, she was used as a submarine depot ship in Germany and was sunk during an air raid, was raised by the Norwegian government after the war, and is still being used as a cadet training ship.
Some of you movie buffs might recognize her. She was the ship featured in the Windjammer back in the 50s.
In the Cinerama.
Cinerama.
Cinerama?
Boy, the breeze has picked up.
How old are you, Red?
Well, it was a great show, the Windjammer Cinerama.
The wind has picked up considerably in the last hour or so much so that I think the Radek had her sails rigged a while ago and then brought them down.
But it's kind of interesting, Chet. It's really out of the north, so when they make the turnaround, they can reset their squaresails if they have to go down to the Black Falcon Pier. So the people who hadn't seen the sails set up in the inner harbor by Charlestown will get a chance to see all the squares set.
Charles Mason joins us now as the executive director of Sail Magazine, and your magazine, I think, is more devoted to those speedy yachts that Dennis likes to pop around the world in. But what does an event like this say to sailors and all of us, those like you who really are sailors and landlubbers like us?
Well, Natalie, the fact of the matter is that whether you sail a 10-foot Optimist dinghy, as the kids are down at Castle Island, or you sail a large deep sea square rigger like these, or any of the ships in between, the principle is the same. You go where the wind is, or you go against the wind. And that's the nice thing about sailing, and that's, I think, what its universal appeal is. It's not very complicated in your head. You can get very complicated, as Dennis likes to do, and as these ships are, but the fact is, the wind is there, and you learn to deal with it and go where it takes you or go where you want to go.
We're looking at Boston Harbor on a gorgeous afternoon, and the tall ship Simon Bolivar.
Yes, Simon Bolivar is a handsome vessel. It's a three-masted bark from Venezuela, named after the famous General Simon Bolivar, who was a liberator of many of the South American countries. A real fine ship. She's a sister ship to the Guayas, and she's does a lot of sail training in the Caribbean and also on her trips over to Europe and out into the Pacific.
And she has her cadets up in the yards, a gorgeous sight there.
With a large Venezuelan flag from the peak of the gaff. You notice that large Venezuelan flag up there.
Flag.
It's almost like a battle ensign.
She's got pretty much all of that 18,000 square feet of sail out too, Captain Shannon.
Right, Chet. She's doing quite well under sail, and she'll do a good job for us today.
We're looking there still at the Simon Bolivar, but pulling up right abeam, and I think we can get a shot of the Alexander von Humboldt coming into her berthing area at Commonwealth Pier, right adjacent to Anthony's Pier 4, where we are in Commonwealth Pier in the World Trade Center.
With her sails in her gear, so she's making her mooring now.
The sails in her gear, right, Red?
That's correct, in her gear.
What a pretty sight to see her pass by us like that.
Certainly has passed the HMS Active there.
The green sails certainly stand out.
Yes, that was a cheers flag flying there. You know, most of the tall ships which paraded in Boston today crossed the Atlantic to get here, and they'll cross it again when they leave, so they've seen a lot of water. In fact, water covers 70% of the globe, 330 million cubic square miles of it, deep and salty. Think about that until we come back. In this modern age, most of us tend to think of the tall ships as being dwarfed both in size and technology, of course, by today's modern gleaming steel ships. But today, as we've been sitting here, we've been dead level with some of these beautiful tall ships, and it's inspiring. Let's see more of them right now.
Welcome back to our coverage of the Parade of Sail here in Boston Harbor.
What a great shot from a top building called International Place at the head of the harbor. There is the Japanese tall ship.
Yes, Kaiwo Maru, number 2 from Japan. She's a 4-masted bark, a very, very large vessel. And she's a merchant marine training vessel for the Japanese merchant marine.
We'll tell you more about that vessel, but right now we want to go to the Fish Pier, the Boston Fish Pier, which is the site of our official reviewing stand, and Jim Boyd and Susan Berg.
Chet, Jim and I are joined by Dan Moreland. He is chief mate of the Niagara.
Dan, tell us a little bit about the Niagara. It is called a museum ship, is it not? A fully functional museum ship?
Yeah, she's a fully functional museum ship, a sailing museum ship. She's a reconstruction of the original Niagara, which was built in 1813 for Oliver Hazard Perry, commander in the United States Navy, and he had her built in the wilderness of Erie to win one single battle against the British fleet, and they did. That's where the phrase "Don't give up the ship" came from that battle. That was his battle flag.
We're looking at the ship right now. How many people are on it, and what are the work conditions like? You say that they're 18th century labor practices. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the headroom and where they live is about 4 feet 10. They sleep in hammocks that are under 6 feet long. They probably put in a 16-hour day. The food's not bad. It comes out of one pot, though, on a wood stove. And they have to jump when they're ordered, and they have to jump right away.
You were on the Danmark before this. You've been on this ship for a year. What keeps you with the conditions like that? What keeps you coming back?
Well, I sometimes wonder, but it's a great life. I do love it, and it just sometimes it's a little tiring.
Now, how do you end up here in Boston's Sail Boston?
Well, we were sent by the state of Pennsylvania to this is the first time the ship's been out of the Great Lakes since she was originally built, and they wanted to be part of this and show the ship off. She's like you mentioned, a fully functional museum ship, and that's her interpretation. We train 20 volunteer trainees at any given time to learn how to sail an 1812, 1813 brig, and we're here doing that on a whole voyage along the East Coast.
Look at her, isn't she beautiful? 361-foot four-masted bark, the Kaiwo Maru, a Class A tall ship.
And she has most of her squaresails set. Of course, they're all aback because she's going into the wind at the present time to go up to the turning point. But once she comes around the turning point, she'll have the wind on our stern from Charlestown down back to Black Falcon.
Give us a whole nother picture as she turns around. She carries a crew of 155, literally translated. Kaiwo Maru means King of the Sea. Relatively new ship, built in 1989. She's operated by the Institute of Sea Training of the Ministry of Transport in Japan.
She'll be going into the Coast Guard base rather than going into Black Falcon. So she'll make the turnaround and go into the berth at the Coast Guard base there, at the foot of Hanover Street.
As many times as we see that shot with the cadets up in the yards, it's always still always a pretty picture to look at.
Does a pucker factor go up, Captain, when you bring a big ship like this into a harbor?
Well, it does, but the Coast Guard is doing a real fine job controlling the anchorages and controlling the crowds of vessels.
So you don't have to worry about the wind and...
we have plenty.
It's a pretty tight place.
It is tight, but there's plenty of assist craft there, and the Coast Guard and all the other law enforcement agencies in the area are keeping the anchorages under control.
The particular vessel you were looking at is the flagship of Croatia. Many of these maxi yachts will be available for inspection, for boarding.
Beginning tomorrow, I think.
Beginning tomorrow, and if you are interested in ocean racing, it might be fun to go aboard one of these things. We referred to them earlier as the Indy 500 boats of this regatta.
Good description, Chet. Good description. There you can see one just spun around and came in underneath the another one. I can't tell which one it is, but you can see how maneuverable they are. They're really very, very big dinghies. And again, as I said earlier, the principles of sailing are just as are no different on the big Class A ships as they are on the maxi boats or the little 10-footers.
This is a very a good breeze for these fellows on the maxi boats right now too, I would imagine. They must love this.
Right, they have a headwind coming up the inner harbor, so they're tacking back and forth and making good footing.
Chet and Nat and all the viewers, it's rare that you'll find this many hardened hard news reporters out on a story waxing so childlike and enthusiastic, but it's really impossible not to just be enthusiastic about how beautiful and splendid this has been. And for all the lack of problems there have been on Castle Island, the same has been true on the water. We've been all the way out into Broad Sound, way out almost to Nahant and back into the inner harbor. As you can see the skyline right behind me. I estimate maybe 200,000 people on maybe 20 to 30,000 pleasure craft, completely well behaved. I mean, literally, we didn't see a problem. We've been listening to the nautical radios. No problem that the Coast Guard has been called to respond to. This is the Amerigo Vespucci going by us right now. You heard the cannons earlier that were going off. I guess that's the end of the Subaru Pier. A lot of the crowd's still there. It's just been spectacular, and I think it's worth noting that this many people have gotten together along the banks of and on the waters of Boston Harbor, all in the spirit of having a good time, enjoying themselves, and they've really done a splendid job. It's really remarkable to think about a 500,000, 1 million people, however many it's been, in a relatively crowded place, having this few problems. It's really worthy of note.
Look at Boston Harbor as we near the end of Sail Boston 92. Pretty soon we'll be seeing the last of 19 flotillas making its way past the reviewing stand in Boston Harbor.
You know, David Ropeik just spoke about the childlike enthusiasm a lot of people, reporters and spectators alike, had watching the tall ships today. I'll tell you something, down here in Boston Harbor right now, you get the feeling that a lot of people just don't want to go home. Some do, but a lot don't. We'll be back with more of the return of the tall ships right after this. Unlike most parades on land, watching today's parade of sail, I think most people had to sit back and wonder a little bit at the gracefulness, at the grandeur. In fact, watching them go by, it was hard not to be a little philosophical. We return now with more of the tall ships.
Here's a beautiful sight. This is the Amerigo Vespucci making its way down through Boston Harbor, leading the 18th of the 19 flotillas that are making up the parade of sail here today. She is an awesome ship, 331 feet long, and how about this? Carries a crew of 450 people.
That's got to be the record, I would think, Captain Shannon.
Yes, it is. She's a three-deck frigate from the 18th and 19th century design, an Italian naval training vessel out of Livorno, Italy, and a real fine training ship, just a full-rig ship, just like Constitution and HMS Victory, as being a three-decker.
Well, that's being so big has its disadvantages, doesn't it? Does she have some trouble windward?
Yes, going to windward, she has a little problem, but she has some nice motors down below and a few propellers down there to push her along. But she's a very ornate vessel, and in any of these parades of sail, the cadets aboard the ship man the yards and man the ratlins in their formal dress uniforms, and they've won many prizes in previous op sails for their fitting out and decorating up their vessel.
I remember them from before when we've had these parade of ships here in Boston, and they usually put on quite a show when they come into the harbor.
Red, do they, we were talking about every ship in this parade of sail must have had some auxiliary power. Do some of these ships, what do they refer to these internal combustion engines as? The iron topsails?
Well, they could call them that, or the little pusher to get them in and out of port, or auxiliary engines.
Yeah. But I bet you that'll be a popular, that'll be one of the more popular boats. The Amerigo Vespucci she'll be berthed in Charlestown. Is that correct?
Yes, she'll be going over to Charlestown there, and she's a very popular ship. Some real handsome cadets aboard there, and they're very well decked out. If you notice, they're manning the boats there.
There they are.
That's what I was remembering. Manning the yards and also the ratlins. You see them all in their white uniforms and standing tall.
And you can always tell the Amerigo Vespucci by the wide white stripes down the hull.
Right. She's a three-decker like the old frigates of the 18th and 19th century, HMS Victory.
Amerigo Vespucci at the head of the 18th of 19 flotillas in Sail Boston 92, the parade of sail through Boston Harbor that began early this morning when Old Ironsides, the USS Constitution, was tugged away from her berth at the Charlestown Navy Yard, taken out to the head of the harbor, where she turned around and led the parade of sail back into the harbor. And then as Old Ironsides went by the reviewing stand here, she fired off a 19-gun salute. That was quite something this morning. Once again, maybe we could talk about ASTA and your desire to raise a few $1 million to build an American tall ship, which would be the first American-built tall ship.
That's right, Chet. There hasn't been an American-built square-rig ship in this country since 1899, and we're in the process of planning and raising funds to build Discovery, an American tall ship, a Downeaster out of Maine, and her purpose will be education, taking people of all walks of life in this country out to sea for some sail training experience, the youth of all ages, as we said before, and then again to come into ports like Boston, Newport, New York, even on the West Coast, and do educational programming for the public and for different groups. And then finally to do films and videos that go into schools all over the country.
How many people are involved in sail training at any given time in the country?
Well, we estimate that ASTA, the American Sail Training Association, has over 100 vessels in its fleet. And our guess is that probably 300,000 to 500,000 people a year are sailing on those vessels.
Really?
Well, we have to remember that it goes on in where the weather permits year-round, or certainly whenever there is good weather. And the sailing experience is anywhere from a day sail to a six-week cruise.
We should mention to folks who are listening in our area that if you're interested in American sail training, there is a display right here in the Charlestown Navy Yard that is part of all of this today. There's a sail training sign-up available there. There's a replica of the Federalist. You can learn more about sail training and what you might be involved with should you decide to join. So if you'd like, if you're interested, take a walk over there at the Charlestown Navy Yard. Let's go to Pam Cross, yes?
Yes, who is down at Bay State Lobster. Pam?
All right, Chet, Natalie, we're waiting for the Kaiwo Maru, which is in the Inner Harbor now, to make it over to the Coast Guard base. It is going to be docking behind me. For some reason, the Kaiwo did seem to have a little bit of a problem. After it cleared, about the fish pier or so, it stopped dead in the water and sat there for a couple of minutes until tugboats came in, and it's moving now. Doesn't seem to be any problem. The only real excitement we had here in the Inner Harbor was a few minutes ago when the Simon Bolivar was being turned around. Right after it executed the turnaround with no problem, a couple of those 25-meter sailing vessels came through very quickly, crossed in front of the Bolivar, and were rewarded with a blast of her horns, but everything went off okay. The Coast Guard came through and there were no problems. At the Bay State Lobster, I'm Pam Cross. Chet, Nat?
Thank you, Pam. Thank you very much. Well, we're coming to the end of our afternoon and our morning and afternoon of coverage.
Our day.
Boston 92, our day of coverage. And a wonderful day, too, and I just can't think of a more fitting tribute to a nation settled from the sea and a great culturally diverse area like Boston to have 7,000 young men and women aboard these vessels representing more than 30 nations gathered here, and they'll be here for the next 3 or 4 days and be able to interact with one another and with the people of the greater Boston area.
And I confess I feel a pride my fellow Bostonians, fellow New Englanders here for having pulled this whole thing off so beautifully with great cooperative effort on the part of everybody who lives here and everybody who's visited here, whether by ship or by car or however they've come, whether they've been participants or spectators.
And
interesting point that we need to remember is the foundation of this country was based on sail training because you had to go through a ship experience to get here a century ago. It was the only way to get to the Americas if you were coming from abroad. So we're hoping that all this activity keeps that spirit alive.
David, we thank you for joining us, and Captain Red Shannon, again, it's a pleasure to work with you again, and we thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise of these great sailing vessels. It was fun to be here.
Thank you, Chet and Natalie. It was great, and let's do it again, and let's do it soon.
Well,
Year 2000, how we'll pitch for that?
Well, not even that. Let's do it a little earlier.
Constitution, 1997, Constitution's anniversary.
200th anniversary.
200th
right?
anniversary.
Right. Okay,
Well,
you know, there was a quote. Go ahead, Natalie.
No,
Sorry.
please.
I said there was a quote I used earlier, and it was just when I was reading in so much of the reading that we've done in preparing for the broadcast. Tony Chamberlain, who writes for the Globe, said this will be the visit of the tall ships, over-promoted, over-reported, a pain in the mizzen, but I wouldn't miss it for anything. We're glad we were here. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thanks for being with us. Hope you enjoyed it as we did.
Well, the parade may be over, but the tall ships aren't gone yet. And through next Wednesday, you can board and tour a lot of them at their waterfront locations. No one knows when they'll be back for sure, but I think a lot of us will miss the sight of so many sails. But tonight, a lot of sailors, and a lot of television crew people for that matter, could use a good night's sleep. I'm Ted Reinstein. Thanks for joining us. Good night from Boston Harbor.